course, our biggest issue from an infrastructure perspective is our North End Water Pollution Control Center. And I love talking about it because it's one of those issues that, let's be honest, it's not the sexiest of issues for the general public, right? We're going to talk about a sewage plant. Hello, everyone. My name is Lauren Remlard, President and CEO of the Winnipeg Chamber. Thank you for joining us today for the Chamber's podcast. Really excited about today's guest. Joining us is Gord Johnston, President and CEO of Stantec. Stantec, some of you may know, a Canadian company doing amazing work across this country, and really excited to be joined by Gord today. Gord, how are you doing?
It's a great day. I've been traveling this week. I'm actually in Calgary today, where it's a little cold and rainy, overcast. But it's a great time to be part of Canada. Great time to be here, and thank you again for the invitation to join you today.
No, I really appreciate you were in town recently and we had the opportunity to chat, and so I'd love to get you on this podcast because one of the things we love doing is bringing the stories of entrepreneurs to our members, but as well examples of our member companies, and Stantec is a proud chamber member, the leadership and what those companies are doing to really demonstrate exactly that expertise that our members bring, not just to their local communities, but in this particular case, Stantec really is a global powerhouse and doing some incredible things. So, and I know when we met at the reception, you were talking about some of the work you did around water projects. Was just fascinating. Again, you've got a problem of how do we get potable water to a community, and you're the solution provider. So I want to delve a little bit into your first job. What did it teach you about the university? You said you started at Stantec, or yeah.
Yeah. So, really interesting. As I think back to my very first job, was delivering papers, and that would have been the Edmonton Journal. That would have been well over 40 years ago. But what's interesting from that, because back then as a paper boy, as they called us, you were almost a little bit of a small business operator. We had to deliver the papers, but that's way back when I had to also go around every week and collect and get people to pay for the papers. And so, but what that really taught me was the importance of showing up every day, the importance of being dedicated to your job and delivering for your customer. And so back then it was actually truly delivering a paper for the customer. And it's regardless of the weather, because sometimes it's cold, sometimes it's hot, and regardless of other commitments that probably seemed extremely important when you were back as a teenager. I'm going to miss a party for this, or I can't hang out with my friends or whatever. But, being reliable, delivering to people who are depending on you. And so back then it was papers, but now it's running a 33,000 person global organization. And so it's delivering to our people, that when we tell them join Stantec and we'll help you deliver, we'll help you build your careers, we'll give you great technical challenges and opportunities around the world, delivering internally to those people, but also importantly, delivering to our clients. Because, as you say, engineers and architects and our environmental teams make a big difference on the world, but we also make a big difference to our clients. Our clients engage with us to deliver a project for them, a road, a building, a school, a water plant. And so, we have to have all our people, say what you're going to do and then do what you said. And so, I think from the very early days of putting a sack over my shoulder and carrying Edmonton journals around. I remember Friday was always the worst day because the TV guide came out and it was really heavy. But you have to just keep on delivering. And so that's kind of been the story of my life.
I love that. My first job as well was delivering newspapers, and you were in Edmonton. I'm in Winnipeg. Weather patterns generally the same, and there were many days I remember looking out there and the snow was blowing and my parents would be like, you signed up for this.
Absolutely.
And it really taught you the value of you honor your word. And I love how you talk about delivering newspapers, but the notion of delivering on your commitment, delivering to meet a need of your customer. In this case, it might have been a senior citizen waiting to get their TV guide. It doesn't matter that principle, that core value of delivering to meet the need, and especially delivering on your word and your commitment has been something that has really stuck with you and has permeated every stage of your career to the point where it's a core value for Stantec.
Absolutely.
Ultimately. I will say for me, it was the Saturday, because we actually had to assemble the Saturday paper, the sections, they all came separately, and it was just, it was inefficient.
Sorry. I remember that too. Sometimes all the flyers would come and you'd have to get the different bits of flyers and put them all together. I feel your pain on that.
And there's some people listening to this podcast now going, absolutely, I remember that. Anyone Gen Xer is absolutely knowing the pain of delivering newspapers. But
absolutely.
So, we've already talked about the fact that Stantec headquartered in Edmonton, but global reach. So for yourself, we've noted you've worked in many jurisdictions, Middle East and other areas. What's the one thing you love and the one thing that you would change about working in Canada, given your experience around the world?
So within Canada, I've traveled from coast to coast, from north to south. And what I really love about it is I enjoy working with people from all the different regions across Canada. Each region has its small individual nuances. For example, I mentioned I'm in Calgary today. In Calgary, you can go to the fanciest restaurant in town anytime wearing a clean pair of jeans and you'll be welcomed in. There's no requirement here in Calgary to ever, dress up, put on a suit to go to. There'll be people in a restaurant who will be, but you don't need to do. Atlantic Canada, you'll find some of the friendliest people that you've ever met. You go to a meeting for the first time and then they ask you to come over for a lobster boil, that evening. So, I love that. But the one common thing that I've found as I've worked all across the country is that Canadians and people are really proud of where they live. The history of their city, of their region, and an individual, a development area, in Winnipeg, when I go there, everyone says, let's go to the Forks, let's have some dinner, let's go, there's always something that people are excited about and very proud of. There's always issues we need to overcome. But, in terms of one thing I'd like to change about working in Canada, as I say, I've traveled all across the country. And one thing that's driven home to me is just how big our country are and how long our travel times are. And sometimes I wish we had a smaller country, or more importantly, I wish we had faster airplanes so that we could travel between, the different jurisdictions a little bit faster. But that's something that's always really interesting to me when we have clients or colleagues come from Europe. They'll come here and we'll say, we're in Edmonton today. We're going to fly to Toronto for some meetings and it's 4 hours. And they'd say, man, I'm from the UK. If I got on a plane for 4 hours, I'd be in Turkey. So that just the scale of Canada is something that it's hard for people to wrap their head around. But it's what I love about the country. Truly, is because that scale, that size, means that we do have these regional differences. And it's something we celebrate.
It kind of reminds me. Thank you for sharing that. It reminds me of a saying that I had read just recently, and it's saying, don't wish for a life without problems, because a life without problems, it just doesn't have texture. It just doesn't have meaning. The greatest joy we get from life is really tackling problems, overcoming them, finding solutions, and achieving, measurable outcomes and making an impact. So pray for a life of challenge. That is, so in some ways, Canada's size, it's wonderful. But I'm going to lean back into the engineering side of it. Our geography, our expansiveness is a problem in some ways that I would say is going to be a wonderful challenge over the coming decades and such to challenge the connectivity. I know is something we've talked about, high-speed rail. How do we make sure we're moving people effectively in this country? But I will say as well, too, one of the things we preach with my two boys, my wife and I, saying always be proud of where you're from. And I love hearing you say that, there's different regions of the country, and sometimes we have differences, but everyone's so proud of where they're from. And I tell my sons that be proud of where you are, because ultimately what you are is a product of two things, nature and nurture. And Winnipeg, Manitoba, it is half of who you are. So don't let anyone ever say anything negative about your city, because ultimately they're saying something negative about you, and you should be proud of who you are. But speaking of regional differences, it'd be kind of impossible not to talk about the big elephant in the room, and that's our current relations with the United States. Stantec, business around the world, business in the United States. So with economic uncertainty around relations with the U.S., trade and otherwise, how is Stantec positioning itself to be resilient, and how would you advise other businesses to prepare?
Yeah, great question, Seth. In fact, earlier this week, I was at an investor conference out in Toronto, and as you can imagine, this was certainly a topic of discussion. And so, at Stantec, we are ideally positioned to weather this period of uncertainty, and it's because of our diversified strategy. And so our core offerings in infrastructure, whether that's roads or bridges or water and wastewater plants or hospitals and other healthcare facilities, data centers, electrical transmission networks, very important, certainly in Manitoba. The environmental expertise that we have, the services that support the energy transition, these are all in demand. And we don't see any slowdown in that type of work. And we put out our financial results for 2024 here in February. I was down in Australia, in fact, at the time when we did it. But we had a record year last year in terms of growth, both organically and through acquisition, which is an area that we grow quite a bit through, in terms of backlog growth, in terms of earnings growth. So, we're thriving in this environment. But, as I said, I think the key to navigate through any period of uncertainty, whether it's a global pandemic or economic conflict or trade-based conflicts with some trading partners or with clients, it's that diversified client base, that breadth of service offerings, breadth of geographies, so you're not overly dependent on any particular client, any type of work, or any geography. And maybe just for a second, that's kind of been the history of Stantec. We started in the mid-1950s in Edmonton as a water and wastewater firm, and being heavily dependent on the Alberta economy, very energy dependent at the time. We've got more diversification now, but the business would strengthen, and then it would slow down again, strengthen, slow down again. And back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, the owners at the time, I was not one, said we need to start diversifying. So we went from water type work to transportation, to buildings and architecture, to environment, to energy type work. Then we diversified across Canada. And then in the early 1990s, we began to buy our first firms down in the United States. And the United States now makes up the largest percentage of our revenue generation and the largest portion of our headcount. And then in the 2015 area, we decided we really need to make a big gulp, and let's go globally, so we're not even dependent on the North American economy. Mm-hmm. And so now about 25% of our business is outside of North America. So different lines of business, different geographies, different client types. No client or no particular project for Stantec makes up more than 2 or 3% of our overall revenue. So if we have a conflict with a client, which we never want to have happen, if we have a project that gets pulled, which we never want to have happen, it's not material to our overall growth and evolution as a company. So that was very, very intentional decision that we made 50 years ago to have a diversified client, business, and geographic model.
You mentioned, of course, wastewater, water. Here in Winnipeg, of course, our biggest issue from an infrastructure perspective is our North End Water Pollution Control Center. And I love talking about it because it's one of those issues that, let's be honest, it's not the sexiest of issues for the general public, right? We're going to talk about a sewage plant. But when you really think about the growth of communities, and we're not just talking economic, like businesses, but to add new housing. Everyone's talking about we need more housing affordability, housing units. You still need pipes in the ground and the ability to move that product, the sewage and water, to a processing facility like the North End Water Pollution Control Center. So our ability to grow is constrained by our ability to foresee the needs and build up for them to support that growth. So I do want to talk a little bit, because you mentioned that's kind of the roots of Stantec. Let's talk a little bit about some of those pressing infrastructure and construction challenges facing Canadian cities today. Talked about Winnipeg's, but what are you seeing in Canada? What are some of those most pressing infrastructure and construction challenges, and where do you see the opportunities for growth there?
Yeah. And so it's interesting. We find many of the same issues in cities across Canada and around the world. You know, as you say, when a city grows, we need roads, we need public transit, we need schools, we need water and wastewater. We need to make sure the energy infrastructure is there, and that's all things that people take for granted, because you assume in Canada, when you go and you turn on the tap in the morning, clean drinking water is going to come out of it. But all around the world, infrastructure is aging. It's in need of repair or replacement. Certainly, there's a need for additional housing. And you know, you're right. Like in Winnipeg, you know, recently we heard, you know, Mayor Gillingham highlighted, you know, Winnipeg's status as a growing city. You know, shifting population dynamics. You know, during his State of the City address. So that's everything from schools to care facilities to upgrading the water and wastewater sewers system. And so, you know, we're really pleased to be part of, you know, partnering with the city on a number of those initiatives. But then you look at housing and development. You know, we've heard the city's director of planning and property and development talk about the importance of attracting more residents to the downtown area. So rather than continuing just to grow on the fringes, let's revitalize downtown. So, you know, looking at reopening Portage and Main, you know, contributes to that revitalization of downtown Winnipeg. But it's similar that I see in downtown Edmonton, where our head office is, or even downtown Calgary, where I am today. These are vibrant cities during the daytime, less vibrant in the evenings, because most people get in their cars or public transit and go out to the suburbs. So, you know, as you look at some of the global cities that we work in, even, you know, Toronto, London, New York, these have these vibrant downtown cores that I think a number of Canadian cities are looking to re-envision. How can we work in that area? How do we get people to come back downtown? So infrastructure, housing, repurposing, you know, less utilized office space, and things, all important, all tools in the toolkit that we're using, not just in Canada, but around the world to do that.
So to build on that, kind of a two-part question, because you talk about vibrant centers, say in a Toronto or a London. One of the things I've always thought is, you know, and kind of brings us back to the beginning of the podcast where you talk about the expansiveness of Canada. You know, when I'm downtown Winnipeg and I'm up in one of the towers and I look, I can literally see outside the city, and you see land as far as the eye can see. And it's a true benefit of living in Canada.
Absolutely.
You know, I have friends come from Europe and they're like, you have so much space.
Right.
You revel in it, enjoy it. But it's hard to build density when you do have that availability. I'm not saying we shouldn't. I'm just saying it's one of the benefits.
Absolutely.
Whereas, say, in a Vancouver or Toronto, they've built up so much, they only have the ability to go up, because there's no more room on the edges to continue to push in that regard. So I guess, you know, well, I guess maybe just a single part question then is your experience, are Canadian cities facing anything different than what you're seeing, say, in the United States or other global centers that you're working in, or are we all generally in the same boat, facing the same aging infrastructure, pressure on financing, infrastructure? Yeah. Where do we stand?
You know, as we look around the world in some of the locations that we work, for example, we do a lot of work in the UK in the water and wastewater space. We're the number one provider of water and wastewater services to the privatized water utilities in the US and the UK, which they're all privatized 30, 40 years ago. The issue there is, as you think about their history, is some of these pipes that are in the ground are 100, 150 years or even more old. So some of the issues that they have about expanding capacity and infrastructure rehabilitation, can you imagine taking a roadway out of service for an hour and for a year to rehab everything in downtown London? An enormous issue there. So while we're all facing similar projects, I think we've been lucky in Canada for a number of years is that some of these infrastructure issues are even more acute around the world in some of these older cities who developed longer and longer time ago. But when you look at a Winnipeg and you look at an Edmonton or even a Calgary, you're right, it's different than a Vancouver that's constrained on a couple sides by oceans and mountains. In Calgary, here where I am today, or Edmonton or Winnipeg, we have that opportunity to continue to expand. And I think the important thing that I've always thought about thinking about housing is we have to build the type of housing that people want. So when you think typically, say downtown Toronto, you graduate from university, technical school, you're in your 20s, you work downtown. It's kind of vibrant. It's exciting. You meet someone, perhaps you end up in a relationship, you get married. A couple of years later, you welcome some children, you adopt some children, you have some children. Then you think, well, I remember growing up when I played in the park, and I got to just run, and there wasn't as much concrete and cars. So then often we'll see at that point of life, either we have to have those facilities in a downtown core, or more often than not, those people will want to move to a more suburban location where they can, raise children. So I think it's important as we think about housing development that we absolutely focus on redensifying and the downtown core. But sometimes there's a point in your life where people want to move, outside. We do a lot of work in Southern California, and very similarly there, they would say people when they first start out straight into the workforce, they want to live on the coast. So they can go surfing in the morning and they can, play beach volleyball after work. But there's a time where you have some children and then you move a little bit further inland because now it's more affordable housing.
We all become our parents.
So it's important really, and these dynamics are different around the world, but I think it's important that we consider all the types of housing that people will look at different stages of their life.
No, absolutely. And, I remember being a young university student thinking, oh, that's it. Bright lights and big city on east and west. And glad to say that Winnipeg offered me something at every stage of my life. And I mean, those are successful cities, Absolutely. Ones that, we talk about mixed use housing or developments. I mean, cities need to be ultimately that mixed use for everyone, because the reality is young people don't want to, when they're early on, don't want to live in a suburban house. And when you have a young family, the bright lights of a downtown may not necessarily be the best thing for you. Speaking of needs, though, again, you're doing work around the globe. What are some of the more common concerns or needs that you're seeing emerging globally from your clients right now, and how is Stantec adapting to address those needs?
What's interesting is that one of the several years ago, let's go back to March 2020. COVID was just starting, an incredible amount of uncertainty in the marketplace. What we heard from our clients is we're very sensitive to fees. We want you to deliver a quality product as you always do, but we need to pull back on fees a little bit. But now the number one question that we're hearing from our clients, once they've of course established that you've got the right skills and expertise and people to complete their project, what we're really hearing from them is, can you complete this project on schedule? Because we're concerned that everyone is busy. Are you overcommitting, or can you deliver according to the schedule? But that's where I kind of look back to where we were talking about earlier in the conversation about what you learned about the first job about delivering papers. And that's just to show up every day, earn people's confidence by just doing what you said that you were going to do. So complete the project on time, great quality, and then hopefully assist them with the next one. So the main thing that we're hearing from our clients right now is related to schedule. And then another thing that we're hearing from a lot of clients right now is talking a little bit more about as you consider the design, can you consider how we can design this product in a sustainable manner? And we're looking at everything there from energy efficiency to the sustainability in the long term of can we repurpose this product at the end, and so on. So a lot of really, really interesting design choices right now that we're working through.
See, and I wanted to pick up on that because, especially obviously with what transpired south of us with the presidential election and, let's talk diversity, equity, and inclusion. There seemed to be a shift on Wall Street, a lot of large U.S. firms moving away from D&I initiatives. And then you started hearing more and more talk about, well, we're going to start retracting from some of our climate change commitments, and sustainability became all of a sudden a dirty word, if you will. And so it's interesting, like, are you finding on a global scale that, yeah, maybe the U.S. in certain pockets are doing that, but globally there's an appetite for a growing appetite for sustainability, and specifically a Canadian designed and delivered type of sustainability?
Yeah, and it's interesting. The word sustainability takes on so many different nuances, and what we're finding when we have clients still in the U.S. who are talking about sustainability, and we find that they're talking about there is certainly environmental sustainability. How do we reduce the footprint of what we're doing? And that's all there, and that hasn't really gone away. But what we really find they're talking about the sustainability in terms of, does the funding sources, can I operate this in the long term? Can we control the energy usage through being a little bit more energy efficient? Do we go to net zero? And certainly from an environmental perspective, but even more importantly, if I can go to net zero, I reduce the amount of energy consumption that I require. My operating costs go lower. And so there's a lot of, those questions are still paramount, still, top of people's mind is that sustainability from when you source these products to when you install them, when you deliver them, throughout the life cycle, and can I reuse this asset at the end for something else? Those are still absolutely top of mind conversations that we find in the United States and around the world.
So, we talk about sustainability, and I want to talk a little bit more about sustainability in skill sets and high-end talent. I mean, engineering is an in-demand profession, always has been. You're a Canadian based but a global company, constant battle for talent, and you're in a global battle for that talent.
Right.
So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, as the CEO of a global firm headquartered in Canada, what are some of the unique, opportunities and challenges as you're casting your net, if you will, globally for that high-end talent that's really going to help you continue to grow and be successful competing on that stage?
Right. Firstly, I can say that Canada has this incredible richness of engineering and architecture and environmental talent. Our universities and technical schools do a wonderful job in producing those. And in fact, what's interesting is that 3 of the top engineering and architectural firms in the world are Canadian. So we punch way above our weight class globally from that perspective. So I've always found Canadians to be really entrepreneurial and also interested in that wide world that's beyond our borders. And so I think those are some of the traits that have enabled Canadian firms to expand beyond our borders and to succeed. But from specifically a Stantec attraction and also very importantly, retention of talent, I think that's something that we do a particularly good job at. Our people are absolutely motivated by great opportunities to work with a top-notch team on the top projects around the world. But the cultural piece that we have at Stantec is very, very important. And so for us at Stantec, what we try to do as best we can every day is empower our people who are closest to the client to work with them on, what is the real issue that they have? How do we solve the client's issues? How do we bring the best of our global teams to contribute? And so that cultural piece is so important. And so what I often say to people is that the people who succeed at Stantec are the ones who wake up every morning thinking about, what can I do for my clients today? How can I push the boundaries of technology and design to meet their needs? If people are looking for a very hierarchical organization where you come in the morning and sit there. I often call it the baby bird syndrome.
Yeah.
If you want to just come in and sit there and wait for someone to come and bring you work or bring you something to chew on, we absolutely need those people. But the people who really rise to the top at Stantec are those ones who are engaged with industry, clients, the world around them, and really making it happen rather than waiting for something to happen to them.
I love that because, I mean, ultimately at the end of the day, you always want that person that's going to bring you solutions, not problems. The person that's going to identify opportunities, not wait to be given the opportunity, right? That's how you build company and build success and build the right culture. I do want to talk a little bit with the talent. One of the things we've, of course, in Canada, we're encountering is a productivity challenge across all sectors. We have this incredible talent. We know it, especially you noted in the engineering. But one other area we have both a talent and a wonderful capacity and an opportunity to address the productivity is around AI. I think a lot of people don't realize just that Canada was really the birthplace of artificial intelligence. And another example of Canadians on a global scale really transforming not just our economies, but quality of life and so much more. I wonder if you just take a moment, like, people are definitely what makes Stantec a great organization. It's what you lead with. But how is AI helping you integrate both that core value of people, but as well leaning into enhanced productivity and finding unique solutions for your clients?
And so, AI is one of a suite of technologies that we empower within Stantec in order to make ourselves more efficient so that we can deliver more product per hour of a designer's time. And so we're using things such as virtual reality, augmented reality systems, and those are fantastic because, I'll give you a great example. If we design a hospital or a care facility, and then you've seen typically the stereotypical engineer comes into the office with a big, huge thing of drawings around there, rolls them out on the paper and says, on the table and says, let's have a look at these. But a lot of our clients, they're not, they're in a hospital setting, might be, administrators or doctors or nurses and these types of people. And they have a harder time, of course, looking at a two-dimensional, like a piece of paper with drawings on it and visualizing what that'll look like. So in a lot of cases, we'll use virtual reality where we can put on a set of goggles with the people and say, let's take a walk down the hallway, and what, as you walk down this hallway or as you sit at your nursing station and you look around and you see, are there things here that you don't like? And we'd have someone say, well, when I sit here, I want to be able to see the doors of all of the rooms in my hospital. I want to know who's coming in, who's going out. And so if you just had a set of drawings, you might not see that. You might start to build things. You built the wall already, and then they come in and say, well, wait, I can't see that door over there. And you have to rip the wall down and change everything. So
no one ever changes anything once you've already started, though, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So huge opportunities, virtual reality, augmented reality. We have a group internally at Stantec, our innovation teams, where we're designing a number of products that we use internally to make ourselves more efficient using we call it parametric design tools. Because a lot of design is based on design parameters. And so, an example might be, in any of the buildings that you might be in or I am in today, we have a concrete slab, that the carpeting goes on and so on. And of course, you've all seen these built where there's all the reinforcing steel that goes inside it and so on. So an engineer spends a couple of days designing all that, and as soon as you do it, your client will say, I want to change something. I want to move the elevators over, the stair. You have to redesign all of that. But we've developed tools now that you can redesign that in 10 minutes, 15 minutes. The system does it rather than an engineer having to do it. So it makes us much more efficient. Some of these products we're actually even licensing externally. We're selling to our clients. But then to your point on AI, which is a fantastic tool to be used, but to my mind, it's not completely the one tool that changes the world. I think all of these tools together change the world. So we have an AI task force where our 33,000 people around the world have great ideas and we'll send it to the task force who will quantify these. We call it a business case or a use case. So things like, can I go to the Stantec proposal library and have it run a first cut of a proposal for me of based on, we've done 20 of these before. We have a massive digital library of our proposals or reports or a first cut of a letter. So we're using that. We've licensed, I think 10,000 roughly licenses of Copilot. And so we have people using it around the world and seeing how can this improve your productivity. So it's extremely important for us as a professional services firm to continue to drive forward with those productivity gains.
I love how you describe your use of technology. It's not an either or scenario. It's the integration. It's people utilizing that technology to be more efficient, to be more productive, to see things differently, right? The example of sitting in your, say, nursing station, being able to see those doors. Integrating that technology into that experience allows you to be able to be more efficient, more product, but it doesn't replace the human element. And that's one of the things that we've been as a chamber talking about AI as it's an enabler. It's any kind of technology for that matter, not just AI. It's always just it's a tool. And we have to learn how to use the tools appropriately, responsibly. If you're not trained on a tool, you might injure yourself. If you're not trained on, say, AI, virtual, you could cause more problems. So the genie's out of the lamp, if you will. There's no putting it back. So now it's just let's lean into it and be as useful and purposeful and as productive in its use as possible. Got a little last question, a little bit of time left here. So for our listeners, is there any kind of projects or initiatives? What's the future look like for Stantec in terms of things you're working on or things that are exciting about the future for you? And how can folks connect with your organization?
Yeah, and so, where Stantec is in this incredibly exciting period in our evolution, we are truly a global company now. So a great example of Canadians exporting really services around the world. And so, what I love now is that there is no project anywhere in the world that we can't successfully pursue and deliver and then get the follow-up project and continue to go. So the future for Stantec is an exciting one. What we see in our strategic plan that we put out at the end of 2023, what's interesting is that it took us 70 years of our evolution to go from a one-man company. It's founded by Dr. Stan Lee, so that's where the Stan comes in, the Stantec, from a one-person company to generate $5 billion a year in net revenue. And what we said in our 2023 plan is that in the next 3 years, we're going to grow that by 50%. So an incredible period of growth, both organically through the opportunities and some of the work that we're doing, as we said, water, wastewater, bridges, roads, hospitals, electrical transmission mains, energy transition, data centers. These are all things that we see fundamentally that will continue in the world. So great opportunities to continue to grow organically. Great opportunities for us to continue to grow through acquiring firms to grow Stantec, to strengthen us in different regions, to strengthen us in different lines of business. And because of our global reputation, we have firms approaching us every day that want to be part of Stantec. So great opportunities for growth in the company. But I think excitingly what that does for our people is it's incredible opportunities for them to work in different geographies, on different types of projects, different size projects in different locations around the world. So, you know what, one thing that I often say to our people is, this is a great time to be Stantec. This is a great time to be us. And I firmly believe that. I believe that every morning when I wake up, and that's what gives me the energy to come in and keep driving our company forward.
I can't thank you enough, not just for being on our podcast, but for that final answer in particular, because let's be honest, and I'm not discounting the real hardship that people are going to be facing in the days, weeks, and let's hopefully just days, but for a prolonged period of time with the various trade disruptions with the U.S., but it's just globally, we seem to be going into a period of, isolationism and protectionism and disrupting global supply chains that have been established for decades. It just seems the pendulum swings really hard back the other way, and that's going to cause hardships. And every day I'm talking to our members and I'm hearing the stories firsthand of I've had to lay off, I'm pausing hiring, I'm not going to be investing in that machinery, that productivity enhancements. And these are real hardships, people that have put their heart and soul into their companies. So I'm really hungry for energy that's of positive nature, and you've provided that. And I love hearing that you don't discount that there's some uncertainty and some choppy waters ahead, but you're leaning into that. You're sailing into those waters. You're confident. You're energized. You see opportunity even where others are seeing challenge. And I think Canada needs more of that. We need companies like yours, leaders like you that are saying we're not discounting these hardships, but we know what we are. We know the quality we bring, and we're going to win. So thank you for what you continue to bring, and in particular that leadership and that positivity. More of that is needed. And again, thank you very much. Really appreciate you joining us today. And of course, people that are listening to them, if you want to find out more about Stantec, please make sure to look them up and engage and find out more of the Stantec story. And maybe there's a role for you as part of shaping that story. So again, Gord, thank you very much for your time. Greatly appreciated, and all the best in your future endeavors.
Great, and thanks again for having me. I really enjoyed our discussions today.
Thank you. Take care.